right, darlings, we're back for Lesson 3, Chapter 1, Biology Honors. It is called The Patterns of Life for Lesson 3. In your own words, how would you explain to a friend that a scientific theory is more than a hunch or an idea? What do you think? Think about that question. And our essential question for this chapter as well is, how do scientists solve problems? So we'll be working on that later today in Google Classroom. Okay. I put a link here that you can click on, and it brings us to our Savas Realize textbook. There are some little interactivities that I'll be assigning from time to time, so let's go ahead and just watch that.
What do bacteria, birds, bears, butterflies, bamboo, broccoli, and bracket fungi have in common? Other than the letter B, they are all alive. That sounds simple, but biologists who study living things for a living usually agree that all living organisms share certain essential characteristics. First, living organisms are made of cells. Cells are the smallest units of organisms that are still considered fully alive. Some organisms, like bacteria, consist of only a single cell. Other organisms, like people, whales, and redwood trees, are made of millions of cells. Second, all organisms share a universal genetic code. What does that mean? In all of them, information essential to life is written in the code that is carried by the molecule called DNA. This information is copied whenever a cell divides and is passed on to the offspring. The DNA in your body is a copy of a copy of a copy, and so on, reaching back roughly 3.5 billion years. Every organism needs energy and chemical compounds from its environment to maintain their metabolisms. This means that they use energy to grow, develop, and reproduce. This energy may come from the sun or from consuming other organisms. Next, all organisms grow, develop, and reproduce. Single-celled organisms perform all of life's essential functions on their own and often reproduce by dividing. The cells of multicellular organisms differentiate as the organism grows, developing specialized structures that perform different tasks. All organisms also reproduce. Some organisms produce identical copies of themselves in a process called asexual reproduction. In most multicellular organisms, two parents each contribute genetic material to their offspring. This is called sexual reproduction.
Okay, a bacteria cell that divides to create two exact copies of itself is an example of, what do you think? I'm just going to randomly click on one. Check answer. Oh, not right. Oh, what is it? Okay, what is it? Try again. Yes.
All living organisms must be able to keep their internal environment stable. This process is called homeostasis. Homeostasis involves things such as maintaining internal body temperature, pH, and many other factors. Also, organisms respond to events around them. Organisms receive many stimuli such as light, temperature, or touch. These may trigger behaviors such as feeding or fleeing and escaping from danger.
Okay, a mouse running away from the sound of an owl's wing is an example of the mouse's ability to
Over generations, groups of organisms evolve or change over time. Evolutionary change in the DNA that all organisms carry links all forms of life to a common origin more than 3.5 billion years ago. This history of evolutionary change can be seen by looking at fossilized remains of ancient organisms. We can see some evidence of this shared history in physical features shared among living and fossil organisms. Other evidence can be seen in shared stretches of DNA's genetic code and in the structures of the proteins that living organisms share.
Okay, so just to recap, make sure we don't forget any of it. We are looking at things like, here's some vocab for you: biology, sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction, so how they reproduce, DNA, metabolism, so how the organism obtains energy, stimulus, homeostasis, and evolve. So those are some vocab for lesson 3 that we just discussed in this video. Okay. And back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So living things share basic characteristics. They're made up of cells. They reproduce. They are based on a universal genetic code, DNA, which is a whole chapter later in the year. Characteristics of living things continued. So grow and development, responding or stimulus, responding to a stimulus, balance and maintaining an internal balance, so homeostasis, and then evolve, change over time. All right, cross-cutting concepts in biology. We have cause and effect. So mechanism and explanation. We've got systems and system models. So we're talking about how all of these different topics we just discussed about living things interrelate, basically. The stability and the change, how one of them affects the other, as far as like ecosystems and homeostasis of the organism's body, different patterns. So we're going to be looking at scale, proportion, and quantity throughout the year, and energy and matter, so flows, cycles, and conservation of these different organisms and their ecosystems, for example. And then, of course, structure and function of the different parts throughout all living things. Oops. What is it doing? Next slide. Yeah? No? Okay. Fields of biology. So there are many different fields of biology we'll talk about this year. We've got global ecology, biotechnology, entomology, molecular biology. She's actually looking at strands of DNA and whether they are A, T, C, or G, adenine, guanine, cytosine, or thymine. You remember those words? All right, and then this chapter talks about scientific measurements. So it is a good idea to review these. We don't usually have time to go through metric conversions, but it's good to just, have your basic conversions, easy to grab or ready for chemistry for next year. All right, so converting these liters to milliliters is 450. If you convert 1 kilometer to meters, that would be 1,000 meters. So you're just moving the decimal place over 3. Okay. Milligrams to grams. Anybody know? It's 5. So you're moving the decimal place to the left 3. Okay. And then let's see. 0.017 grams to milligrams is 17. 130 meters to 0.13 kilometers. And last one, 2,500 milliliters to 2.5 liters. All right, so that is our conclusion for Lesson 3, Chapter 1 in biology. If you go to the end of the book, it's on my page 32, you can see that there is a study guide, okay? And I do recommend that you guys find this study guide page. It gives you a summary of each of the lessons that you can use when I have you guys do your folders. Well, this year it's a modified interactive outline, and you can find ways to organize your information, and we call it a study guide because it does help you review all the information. For example, there's a good concept map on there that we will likely be going over in class together. Okay, so let me know in Google Classroom if you have any questions below this post, And I will see you for chapter 2.